This is Platemark, a deep dive into the world of prints and the people who make the ecosystem tick. I'm your host, Ann Shafer. As an independent curator and fair organizer, I'm on a mission to demystify printmaking and expose the heart of this collaborative community. From the technical challenges to the creative breakthroughs, we're taking you behind the scenes of the art world's most charming corner. Platemark, bettering the world one print at a time. Today, we are diving deep into the legacy of a powerhouse publisher that shaped modern, contemporary printmaking, Parasol Press. Joining me is Rachel Vogel, assistant curator at the Addison Gallery of American Art, and the brilliant mind behind the exhibition Parasol Press, Breaking New Ground. We're talking about the vision of founder Bob Feldman, unforgettable collaborations with artists like Dorothea Rockburne, and the complex alchemy between artist and publisher. You won't want to miss this one. Let's dive in. Rachel, it is lovely to see you. Thank you so much for coming on Platemark today.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to chat with you.
Good, excellent. So we're here to talk about one particular project, although I'm, of course, interested in you and your journey as well. But we're here to talk about this tome, Parasol Press, Breaking New Ground, a book that has been recently published by your institution, the Addison Gallery of American Art. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
An amazing feat, my God. And also, before we get too far, introduce yourself for everybody.
So I'm Rachel Vogel. I'm the assistant curator at the Addison Gallery of American Art, which is on the campus of Phillips Academy, which is a high school in Andover, Massachusetts. And I've been here for about 3 years.
Already? Wow.
Yeah, time flies.
God, Jesus. Yeah, so Andover, as it's known colloquially amongst the boarding school peoples, is a very highly rated boarding school for young high school types. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it may well be the only private school with its own gallery/museum.
Yeah, I think we are the only collecting museum. So, I think there are other schools that have more temporary exhibition space galleries, but we're very unique in having a whole museum. So the school goes back, it was founded in 1778. So it's coming up on its 250th, 2 years after the 250th of the United States. And then the museum was founded in 1929, 1930, opened in 1931. So it's been, we're coming up on almost our 100th anniversary, and it's just really special to have this museum. And it's a teaching museum. We prioritize working with both Phillips Academy students and students of all levels from pre-K to college across the Boston area. And so it's a really special place to work. And I come from a teaching background. I was a high school teacher, my first job before going to grad school, and then loved teaching when I was in grad school. So it's really nice to be able to have a little bit of both worlds, have, the curatorial role, but then also get to work so much with students. So it's really great.
It's such an unusual setup. It's fascinating. Is the collection based primarily on gifts from alums?
Yes. Before it was a museum, it was just works that our founder, Thomas Cochran, was collecting, and they were in the boardroom. And that was a group of a couple hundred works that then became the foundation of the museum. And since then, we have a pretty modest acquisition budget. We still make purchases, especially with fundraising help from friends and alums, but by and large, a huge part of our collection does come as gifts. And actually, Bob Feldman, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, played a role. There have been several waves of big gift acquisitions in the Addison's history. And so he played an important role in the 90s when the museum was trying to grow its modern contemporary collection.
Well, that was a good way to do it. Yeah.
Yes. So Parasol Press was founded by Bob Feldman, who was a Phillips Academy alum, and his daughter also went to Phillips Academy and is currently on our board of governors. And he was always a huge supporter of Phillips Academy and the Addison. And so in the 80s, he joined the Addison Gallery Committee, which was a sort of group of advisors that approved acquisitions and served as an advisory board. When that was relaunched in the early 80s, he was selected as a member of that committee, and then he served on the 50th anniversary committee, which was trying to drum up alumni engagement. And then there was something in the early 90s called the Art Drive that was really propelled by three alums. So Feldman, the gallerist Alan Stone, and he and Bob. That's also part of the Parasol story, is Alan and Bob's relationship. And then Frank Stella, who has been one of the most generous alumni donors. And so he's given a lot of his own work, a lot of work of his contemporaries. And so that was this really important moment that solidified the 70s and beyond in our collection through those gifts.
Okay. So the subject of the book, moving on from Alan Stone and Jack Reynolds et al., back to Bob Feldman, we obviously need to talk about the press, but I'm so curious about, the germination of the whole thing. So I'm sure Jack Reynolds has something to do with it. There is a huge lump of Parasol Press material at the Addison. Is it complete? Is it everything? No. Okay. And you see my little brain going. And did the things dribble in, or was there let's have a really robust and, exhibition worthy group of things come to the Addison?
So it's definitely not complete. So about 50 to 60% of the show is from our collection. And I think we certainly have, if not the largest institutional collection of Parasol prints, one of. It's about 250 total prints and also photographs, because Parasol published a few photography portfolios in the early 70s. And it was really just definitely drips and drabs, not comprehensive. And it was part of Bob's annual gifting. But I guess the story of the origin of this exhibition is I was actually still finishing my dissertation on conceptual artists and their use of printmaking. And so I had known about Parasol Press and Bob because he was the one that really introduced a lot of these minimalist and conceptual artists to printmaking for the first time. And it's literally like my second day at the Addison, and I'm reading this tome, our 65-year anniversary book. And I actually start reading about the history that I was just talking about, where, there's this big moment in the 80s and 90s and the role that Feldman played in this. And I was like, oh, I know this guy. I'm familiar with his work. And he had just died. This is early 2023. He had just died the previous year. And so literally in my first week here, I went to their curator and our director and was like, I think this is a really perfect show for the Addison. There's never been a retrospective of Parasol Press. This seems to be the moment. He unfortunately didn't get to do a show like this in his lifetime. And, it feels like this would be a great way to honor Bob and his contributions to this museum. And also, this is a really important story in modern contemporary printmaking in this moment of the American print renaissance. And I just wrote about a lot of these works. And so it was just this perfect kind of alignment of institution, my interests and expertise and timing. And so I got it on the calendar pretty quickly after I started here, and basically have been working on this exhibition and catalog, my entire time so far.
Ever since.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. I mean, I know obviously your experience writing your dissertation means that you were deep, up to your eyeballs in research on this topic. How big an opportunity did you have to move beyond that research and gather more and new stuff for this project?
Yeah, I knew of Parasol Press and I knew of its reputation and some of its projects, but I certainly didn't know its history. I came to Parasol through looking at these prints that were published by Parasol, but printed with Catherine Brown and Crown Point Press primarily. My dissertation was really about making, and so my research had focused more on the print workshop aspect of things. This whole history and the story was definitely new to me. I certainly didn't know that Parasol had continued to publish prints until, the early 2000s. I didn't know about this constellation of forces that was bringing all of these people together, and really even what the role of a publisher was. I mean, I obviously know what a print publisher does because that's part of understanding the print ecosystem, but there aren't a lot of exhibitions or texts about print publishers. So I think, understanding what his role was, what Parasol's role was, and, approaching a history that's more from this almost, he's playing a role as really a matchmaker and someone who's bringing people together and advocating for these artists and these printers and trying to come up with a new audience for print. But it's like one step, beyond what I had really been focusing on, which was primarily what the artist is doing in the print workshop. So that, I think, was a totally different way of thinking about printmaking that only, I got to experience and learn about through working on this.
I'm racking my brain to try and come up with a list of publisher-only publishers, It's fascinating because the relationship has to be different because you're not standing there in the shop every day thinking about and working with and talking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of fascinating. But from the things that you were able to find in some of the letters and everything, I was like, he was really deep in it. Like it seemed like he was more than the wallet,
Totally. And I think that, I'm still interested in the making. And so I feel like the exhibition and the catalog as well is trying to balance, almost three stories at once. One is really just a story of print's role in contemporary art and how much of a role it's playing. I think one more financial objective that Bob had was that people would pay the same amount for these really ambitious prints as they would for paintings and sculpture, and really elevating the status. Of course, he's not alone in this at this moment. So one story is just the significance of printmaking within, the art ecosystems from the 70s to the beginning of the 21st century. One is the story of Parasol and how it is founded and developed, and, those relationships and his role in getting these projects into the world. And then another really is how these artists took inspiration from printmaking and took seriously the invitation. And so it's kind of balancing the close looking at how these prints reflect a certain relationship of the artist in the print shop, and the story of how printer, artist, publisher are all playing different roles in, establishing this new generation of printmakers or artists working in print.
Where did you find all the good stuff?
So,
not the prints, but like the letters and everything. Like, where did all that stuff live?
So I was super lucky to be able to go to Portland, Oregon, which is where Bob had moved in the early 2000s. And his wife, Julia Mangold, beautifully preserved this warehouse that had a lot of the work. I had hoped when I started this project that I was going to walk into this warehouse and there would be, a proof of every single print that Parasol published. That was not the case. So there was much more, treasure hunting to be done. But the correspondence was incredible. I mean, he really did an amazing job of documenting, his interactions with these artists and with dealers and with printers. And so I was really lucky to have this sort of wealth of archival sources. And actually, that will now be coming to us. We're acquiring it through the Phillips Academy Library Special Collections.
Wow,
and so
that's great.
It's amazing. And I am so happy that we get to do that because there's so many gems, archival gems in this collection. So I'm excited that, we have the exhibition, we have a lot of the prints, and now we'll also have this repository for this archival material. So hopefully this makes people continue to want to think about Parasol. And now we have nicely accumulated all of these resources so that it is easy for them to pursue that research.
That's great. And now everybody in the world will know that you are the repository.
Yep.
Do you have as the curator, do you have a list of all of the Parasol things you don't have yet?
Yes. So
the campaign begins.
Yeah. And so, through this project, if you see the exhibition, which I hope everyone has an opportunity to do, there are a lot of promised gifts on the wall. So that was really exciting that we were able to grow our Parasol collection through this exhibition, both through the Parasol estate, through alums who are friends of Bob, sometimes through the artists themselves. But there's still, the book includes a catalog of all of the editions. I'm not well on camera here, but it is many, many, many pages. And so I think it's probably just the prints, not even counting the photographs, individual prints. I think it's in the range of 2,000. And I don't think we'll be able to get a comprehensive archive of every single Parasol print, but I am glad that, at least it exists in paper that people can see all of the prints that were published.
Yeah, it's a serious service. Like, I, of course, came across Parasol prints in my life as a curator, many times, but I didn't really know that much about it. I just knew they did cool stuff. And now there's this catalog raisonné of all of their output. Like, it's really an invaluable service for every print room and curator out there. So, thank you.
Thanks for the endorsement. Yeah, no, it really, that was also an important thing about the timing of this is this felt like the moment. I mean, part of the reason that we're able to accept the archives is because the Parasol estate as such is, dissolving. And so it felt like it was really important to be able to accumulate this, list of all of these prints before, it had its challenges for sure, but it's a lot easier when I was able to dig around in these materials in their current state than to try and piece this together down the road. I think it probably would have been impossible. So it felt like this is also a way for Parasol to live on now that there won't be, besides our repository of archives, that there won't be a physical Parasol Press anymore.
Well, so the burning question is on our little cataloging cards, which some museums still use, and in the databases, will the reference to the book be Vogel #2 or Feldman #2? What do you think? Let's make it clear right now. Vogel.
Yes.
Well, so for people who aren't sitting in a print room, curators keep track of all the prints. So if you have, think of a good example that doesn't have like 15 different catalog raisonnés that you have to deal with, like Mater or somebody. But there are these numbers, right? There's the Holstein numbers for all of those different artists. And so when a catalog raisonné comes along, if I got this book in the museum department, I would immediately open it up and add the numbers that you had assigned to each of these editions to the ones that were in the collection. And it would be known as Vogel 22 or so everybody.
So now my
get
name
out
will
your pencils.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. That would be a dream to have a reference in a print room after you.
Then this also book allows my name to live on in perpetuity.
That's right. Yeah. Oh my God. It's so exciting. What was the most fun part?
Honestly, I mean, I love research. And so I think digging through those archives I think about this now in terms of my own record keeping. The fact that everything is digital and we are not doing, we have our paper archives and we make sure that, checklists and loan forms get in there. But correspondence, like I'm not printing out those emails and just reading through. Bob's had a ton of correspondence with Catherine Brown, and like you really get to understand the nature of that relationship. There's such a sense of intimacy, and I really felt like I got to know these people through that correspondence, and it's so much more than could ever make the show or make the book. And so I think just being able to spend so much time almost like recreating a moment in time, the social world, that is something that I love to do so much and was really grateful for a project that let me do that. And then, of course, because this is the past, but somewhat recent past, I also got to speak with a lot of people, artists, printers, people who, knew Bob well. And one thing about Bob Feldman is every single person is going to have at least a dozen Bob stories. Like he was a character, had a great sense of humor. And so just getting to also, hear these stories helped bring Bob and Parasol and this moment in time alive in a way that is the reason that I love doing, more historically grounded exhibitions, to be able to do that.
If you could go back to 1970, whatever, and be a fly on the wall as an artist was working with a printer somewhere doing something, do you have an idea of which print you are the most curious about?
Oh, well, so I would love the Dorothea Rockburne series, Locus.
Yes.
Those are some of my favorite prints. They're just absolutely stunning. And I know from the correspondence that they were tricky to print. There was a lot of, so they started the edition in either 72 or 73, and they weren't published until 75. And there was a lot of drama that happened. I mean, they ran out of paper because there was so much sort of waste in the printing process. These were super precise. Both Catherine Brown and Dorothea Rockburne had very exacting standards. And so the edition had to get smaller. And then it was, how is this going to break down in terms of what the edition to be sold was versus printer's proofs and artist proofs. And so I know that there was a lot that happened both in the making of those prints and then afterwards. And so that would be definitely one that, first to even see the reactions to Rockburne saying, I want to fold up all of these pieces of paper and then run them through the press like 5 times, stick an aquatint plate on there, just see what happens.
Well, yeah, so that makes me think that we should stop and describe the set, because I don't think I've ever seen one of them in person anywhere. And when I saw the images in the book, I was like, I want one.
So these are prints that she folded. And so each one, first within the dead center of the sheet, she printed a gray cross and then folded each according to her sort of mathematical formula. So there's this logic to the way that these are folded with, major spines and minor spines. And this goes back to her interest in mathematics and topology. And so once they're folded, there was an aquatint plate that was inked with white ink. And it was the fold. So first the folded kind of structure is run through the press to really deepen these folds. And then it's run through with an aquatint plate, which prints onto whatever was facing it. And so there's actually ink on both sides of the print when you unfold it, because
it's printed folded.
It's printed folded. And then when you purchase the portfolio, they come folded and you unfold them. And that way they retain, this kind of dimensionality. And it's interesting to see them in different collections, because based on different ways that they've been framed or stored, some really have maintained more of that dimension. But they're very subtle, because it's just, white ink on off-white paper, and then these crease lines, but then also the plate mark creates its own quality. And so what I love doing when looking at them is like almost reverse engineering. Like, in order for this to have been inked and this not to have been, how must have they been folded and when they were run through the press? And so they're like a puzzle. They're just so incredibly stunning as artworks. I think they're probably the prints that I would most want to have in my home. Maybe the entire Addison's collection, but definitely I think from the show. So they're really just stunning prints.
This is so long before Taube Auerbach and her folded canvases, and and I'm sure Taube is a smart woman. I'm sure she knows about these prints, right? Like, she wouldn't have missed it. But it's just so fascinating to think about. It takes objectness so far off to the side in such a spectacular way. I can't even get over how beautiful they are.
And one thing that I've always really liked about Rockburne's practice is the way that she almost, even her broader practice beyond these prints is thinking about ways of making and artistic process and making that the subject of the work, and thinking about what it means to be a drawing, what it means to make a painting, and almost deconstructing the elements of that often into these really subtle, more installations. And so when she goes into the print workshop, of course, she's thinking, what is a print? And she's just so taken by the press and the fact that it's exerting, all of these tons of pressure onto these sheets of paper. And even the role of the Platemark and intaglio, that these are not two-dimensional works, that there is this objectness, there is this physicality. And so she tries to figure out, how can I make a print about that, about, the force and, space that's involved in printmaking, which I think is a thread that I try and pull out, across all of the artists that Parasol is publishing, is the way that they are taking seriously the invitation to make prints and that often becomes part of the work that they're making, is thinking about their experience in the workshop or the sort of mechanisms of printmaking or the tools and techniques of printmaking.
It's the thing that people always toss at printmaking, that we're also consumed with the technical parts and everything. But I feel like these make a real case for paying attention to the making and highlighting that process. So funny. I don't know why we get such shat upon. It makes me nuts.
And I think in the wall text, I try and, because I do think that so much of understanding these prints is having a sense of how they were made. And so a lot of the text in the exhibition is talking about these experiences of the artist in the print workshop. It's not as much of a, there's some technical description of what is this process, but it's more, how did the artist arrive at this technique or process, or what are they being drawn to in these processes, but then trying to make it not overburdened with this technical description that I do think print people are often accused of being, so obsessed with. But I think these artists were interested in going into a print workshop. Many of the artists had never made prints before. Many of the artists had never made etchings or intaglio prints before, even if they had some experience with other processes. And so I think there's something about them being like, this is new and totally different, and I want to see what I can do with it. And that openness that only comes from trying something new and almost not knowing the rules, so you don't know when you're breaking them. And I think that's a big part, like that sort of freedom and willingness to experiment, and then the printer's willingness to experiment and being like, let's go, like, let's see what we can do. And then Bob saying, the sky's the limit. Like, I want you to make the print that you want to make, even when it is, it takes months to do, or even when it's Chuck Close saying, I want to make the world's largest mezzotint, and, sharing this ambition and wanting artists to be able to do the thing that they want, and, trying to free them of as many obstacles. It's like that freedom that only comes from like not being afraid to fail or trying something new, that all three, printer, publisher, artist, all had to have. And then we get to see what resulted from that freedom.
It's like such a magical thing. And which is what, of course, we all are always shouting at the top of our lungs at people, like, it's really, you think of us as reproducing something else and pushing print, but it's so much more, and it makes me crazy. It makes me crazy. But let's talk about Keith, because this isn't a crazy mezzotint by Chuck Close. And I have to tell you, before you start talking about it, when I got to the Baltimore Museum, the chief curator at the time was Jay Fisher, who is sadly no longer alive. But he would tell a story about, I forget, maybe it was Bob, came and offered him that print at some point for like $500. And Jay said no.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably would very likely could have been Bob, because he was like going around like, trying to peddle this print. And it was, I mean, it might have been $1,000, $2,000, but it was like very expensive for a print at that moment. Now, now it's a steal. And there's a lot of correspondence, some I published in the book, about his back and forth with Catherine Brown, where she's like, we can do this, but it's going to be huge. It's going to be expensive. Are you sure you really want to do this? It's not going to be able to fit in a pretty portfolio box. Like, it's going to be a challenge to move these even. And then you're going to have to figure out who's willing to spend this amount to make it worth your while. There were only 10 made. Those who were able to snap it up when they came out now, I think, are happy that they made that choice.
Well, yeah. Was it the only mezzotint? He must have done other mezzotints.
I think it's the only mezzotint he did.
Oh my God. And it's gigantic and it's glorious, of course.
Yeah.
But can you imagine like trying to pitch a mezzotint, a technique which had completely lost its ground as a thing that anyone would want to do, really? I mean, it's kind of fascinating, everything that gets wrapped up in the selling of, like, the packaging of that story. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe you missed it.
And definitely as a curator, it like makes me, I'm like, what are today's keeps? Like, what are the projects when people come and I'm like, this is crazy that I'm gonna, regret 50 years down the road.
He definitely regretted it. That is the truth. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, golly. It's so amazing. I mean, there's always the ones that got away, and that was definitely it got away for Jay.
But he wasn't the only one. I don't think he had a lot of takers going around to print rooms trying to convince people to to purchase this. So
I know, but it's so good. Oh my God. Despite the issues with Chuck Close as a guy who.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of separating the art from the artist for a few of the artists in the show.
But there was a surprising amount of gender equity, I thought. Like he definitely was working with both genders, and I applaud him for that. Probably not as many Black artists.
No, and actually it's interesting. The last project that he was trying to do was a print with Kara Walker, and there actually is correspondence about wanting to pursue this project, but it never happened. Yeah, I mean, I think it is both a testament to what the art world looked like at that time and, people's own blinders that even though he was able to give opportunities to many women artists, it is a very white list of artists that were published by Parasol.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. They're for better or worse. There are all those reasons. But I mean, the Agnes Martin prints, the grids, I think they were at the BMA's in their collection. I was like, what are these luscious things? Like,
Yeah.
As a print person, you're just sort of like digging around like, oh, what's this portfolio box? Let's check it out. There's these glorious minimalist things. Oh my gosh. They are beautiful.
So the Agnes Martin portfolio, that was the first time she had done anything with printmaking. When Bob reaches out to her, she is kind of in the early stages of what would be her first kind of big show in Philadelphia, but she hadn't made work since leaving New York. She's, in New Mexico, totally isolated from the art world. And he writes her and he's like, I know you might not be totally into this, but I just want to tell you, like, a lot of artists that we've worked with were skeptical or hesitant at first, and they really came around. So, I really think that I'm the best person to do this with you. And she agrees to have him come visit her in New Mexico. But what's really interesting about that portfolio is he had been making primarily etchings with these minimalist artists at the time. And so he assumes, Agnes Martin, like these beautiful kind of hand-drawn lines, etching is going to be the perfect medium. And she goes, no, if I'm going to make a print, I want to make something that reminds me of these Josef Albers prints that I saw, these screen prints. And like, that's what I want to do. And I don't want to try and replicate the hand-drawnness. If I'm going to make a print, I want it to be doing something that a print can do. And so she chooses screen print and likes it for these kind of, the mechanical precision of the lines, which is totally different from the kind of sensitivity of her gestural mark making in her own drawings and paintings.
I think I would be on Bob's side and would be feeling like you don't want it to look like it came out of a machine, But I feel like the subtlety of the coloration and that there's things about it that make it look so ethereal and non-machiney that it sort of saves the exactness of the grid.
And she's so precise with how the visual spaces, she wants them all to be over matted with a very specific dimension so that the sort of tension between the image and the margin is exactly so. There's tons of correspondence going back and forth about choosing the right paper. And she had sent him a sample of this super early German paper, and they're trying to match it. And he keeps sending her samples, going to every paper store in New York City and sending them to her. And is this going to work? Is this going to work? No, it's not quite right. She ends up going with a Japanese very thin paper. And so it goes in a totally different direction, but that's kind of an off-white paper, almost pinky, and then the ink is gray. And so, there's this really subtle, delicate balance between figure and ground. And so you still see her mark, but it's just in a different way. She's thinking about what are the components that printmaking is offering and what control do I have over those elements and I think in a different way than her drawings and paintings.
I feel like the minimalist artists are really good at thinking through the nuggets, the issues, or like what it is that, like that's the whole nugget of their work, right? But do you feel like somebody was talking them through the issues with the printmaking, or do you think Agnes Martin's in New Mexico going, I really think that this is the answer, and him going, well, let's see what we can do?
Well, so she sends drawings to Bob, and then those are sent to Luitpold Domberger in Germany, and he sends back proofs based on those drawings, and she is not happy with them. And so she goes to Germany, and actually Bob is supposed to accompany her, but then something came up. And so she actually goes with Catherine Brown, who...
Oh, right.
She just like happened to be in New York at the time. And Bob was like, do you want to go to Germany with Agnes Martin? They're all together problem solving. They're trying different papers. They're trying different inks. They're proofing it in front of her. And I don't think it's maybe in the same type of conceptual approach, but I think it's more like gestalt, like this is doing it for me. This is right. This isn't right. But there is a lot of problem solving that's happening as they're printing the edition. And I think she has a lot of autonomy, I guess, is what I'm trying to say in that work. And she's interested in that kind of process of translation. Like she's interested in sending drawings and getting back something else. But then when it actually comes to making the edition, she knows exactly what she wants. And the edition was not going to be printed until it was as she wished.
Does Andover have an art history program? Where did Bob go to college?
So he goes to Brown for undergrad and then goes to Yale for law school and is a lawyer for like a hot second. He works for the Securities and Exchange Commission as a government lawyer, and then is like, this is not the world for me.
Can you imagine?
And there's a lot of like funny stories of him showing up to court with his like tennis shoes because he had a tennis game after, this was just not his world. And then he falls backwards into printmaking, first starting to work for a book company that his father works for, and then starts, thinking about rare special editions, more lithography that is more in the like rare book realm than straight up printmaking. And then from there starts getting more interested in the idea of printmaking as its own thing. Also, in the same way that these artists are coming into something that they don't know, Bob is also a stranger to the art world and is learning it as he's going. And so I think there's this kind of openness and certainly charisma that makes people feel really comfortable around him and allow them to trust him because he seems to trust the artist to do what they want to do. And he's like, I'm not gonna stick my thumb in this because I'm not an art person. So you don't have to worry about me meddling or, telling you what you should do. That's your job. My job is to, sell these prints.
It's really fascinating because, I mean, if he's friends already with Alan Stone, who's a legend, by the way, everybody, Alan Stone's legendary gallerist in New York, who didn't really deal in prints.
No, yeah.
No. Like my recollection is lots of African objects and paintings.
Yeah, I mean, so at the time that Bob kind of reconnects with him, and Stone is, as I mentioned, also a Phillips Academy alum. And so when Bob decides to kind of do this art world thing, it's Alan Stone who's taking him under his wing. And so Parasol starts in the storage room of the Alan Stone gallery. And he's starting things, but it's really just like he's using Alan's phone line and making his calls. Yeah. And so some of his first projects or first contracts, they don't all end up being executed first, but are with Wayne Thiebaud and Richard Estes, who were artists that Stone was exhibiting at that time. And so Stone is also showing Bob the artist that he likes and, is advocating for and championing and supporting. And so Bob first works with or, starts working with those artists before finding his own sense of artistic taste, I guess, and then gravitating more towards these minimal and conceptual artists.
Yeah, it is fascinating when you look at the book that like there's some photorealism. But oh no, wait, there's Agnes Martin. Yeah. It's like, whoa, bing, bing, bing.
Yeah, especially in the early years. I mean, it kind of is interesting because it does feel Like there are a lot of moments that are really cohesive, but especially in the beginning, when you look at the full list of all of the prints and you're like, oh, this was just someone he liked. This makes no sense with the rest of the people that he's publishing, probably wouldn't have the same collectors. He was just friends with them. And so he wanted to support
Hey, if you can,
these
why not?
artists. Yeah.
All right, so let's turn away from the project, which is really fantastic. And again, congratulations. But I also, of course, on the pod want to talk about how people get to where they got. So can you just share a little bit about you and how you figured out prints were your thing?
My first job in a museum was actually, it was at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, and it was in the Works on Paper and Photography Conservation Lab, which was such an incredible experience. And, you know, you don't realize the things that are shaping the rest of your life as they're happening, but like this was one of those. You know, my undergrad in art history had been really theoretical and in this tradition of post-structural analysis. And so it was very theory and not very object.
Wow. Where did you go to school? Who taught you that?
Vassar. So Molly Nesbitt was my thesis advisor, and I took a bunch of her modern contemporary classes, but she's very, you know, she's up here, and it was great. And I didn't know what she was talking about a lot of the time. And then that was part of the fun, is like figuring it out. And you're like, you know, 6 months later, you're like, oh, I get it now. But it wasn't object. I mean, it was object driven in that we're, you know, obviously thinking about objects, but it was not about their making and materiality in the same way as then when I'm looking and thinking about works on paper, primarily prints in the conservation lab, where it's all about how they were made and, you know, their physical properties and what ink is this and how is that going to impact, you know, how it can be treated. I'm the administrator. So I'm scheduling things and making sure that they're moving around the museum according to, you know, the right timeline. So the assistant conservator was Christina Taylor, who now is at Philadelphia Museum of Art. And she, in addition to being a wonderful conservator, is also a printmaker herself. And so, you know, my friendship with her and her mentorship of me in a lot of ways sparked the print bug. You know, I just became really interested in this kind of world of art making that I didn't have really any prior experience with. And the fact that it's coming not from theory, but from the perspective of a conservator and a maker, you know, an artist, is just a totally different way of thinking about art. And so after that job, I started a PhD program at Harvard and didn't apply with a print project. And then it was just incredible timing that as I arrived, Jennifer Roberts, so I was co-advised by Carrie Lambert Beatty and Jennifer Roberts. And this is when Jennifer Roberts is kind of, you know, going on her own print journey.
Which she's moved on from,
now she's in outer space. Now she's on the moon. So I caught her at a good time. It's all about timing, you know? And so I took some really wonderful classes with her, both about making and like continuing this idea of thinking about the materiality of objects, and then also some really incredible print classes, including one that was both an art history class and a studio art class. So we were making our own prints. You know, I had already had this interest in printmaking. Then I enter a program where I'm able to take really incredible coursework, thinking about print really expansively. And so my original interest, which was conceptual artists of the 1960s and 70s, when I learned that these artists who, you know, the sort of stereotype or whatever the conventional narrative about conceptual artists is, they're not making objects and they're trying to make things that can't sell. And I find that there's this huge body of work where they're making not only one object, but many objects. And, you know, printmaking is often seen as a medium that's designed for the market. It felt like there was this kind of tension there, and I was interested in why they were making prints, and just even the fact that through things like Parasol Press, through the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design had a lithography workshop, and they're bringing a lot of conceptual artists. So there are these weird spaces that are encouraging conceptual artists to enter into the print workshop and work in a way that seems really contrary to their typical practice. And I became really interested in that, and especially how it made me think differently about printmaking. It made me think about printmaking as a conceptual practice and the aspects of printmaking as having these, conceptual resonances. And so definitely there's the DNA of Jennifer Roberts in that kind of line of thinking. But that was my dissertation project. And then, as I mentioned, it just perfectly happened. So I got the job at the Addison as I was finishing up just a few months before I defended my dissertation. And so it was really wonderful to then be able to kind of roll all of that thinking into a project that wasn't, a continuation of that same argument, but was picking up on some of its premises and then, was more of a historical or institutional project.
It'd be okay if it was, Rachel.
There's more to do with that. That I had to give it I had to put it to bed for a while.
Oh, okay.
And then once I have some space from it, maybe there will be something that comes out of the dissertation work as well. But you gotta, after looking at it in the face for, half a decade, I'm like, we got to do something a little bit different.
Right. The fascinating thing is, I suppose that conceptual artists are interested in the multiplicity aspect, or some of them can pick that up as a central tenet. But I feel like for most of the artists that are working back with Bob Feldman, that's incidental, that they're interested in the technical pieces and parts and what's possible, and less interested in it as a commercial viable something or other.
Totally. And so, both aspects of my dissertation, and definitely comes out in this project as well, is this idea that less so reproduction, but more seriality, that there's a serial kind of cadence of printmaking that conceptual artists related to. There's this idea of breaking things into its constituent parts that resonated. The idea of delegating labor. I mean, this is a very conceptual premise. And so the idea that just like LeWitt is not doing his own wall drawings, he's also not making the marks that we see on the piece of paper. That dovetails really nicely with these kind of conceptual premises. The idea of additionality, or the kind of creation of multiples, not again as a reproductive technique, but as a way of dematerializing the object, or giving it allowing it to exist in multiple places at once, as opposed to it having this kind of like erratic, singular, original presence.
Right. I'm thinking, as you're talking, my brain is running through artists who deal with the addition as the subject.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about the Bill Thompson that Center Street Studio published. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's basically a grid, maybe, 16 by 16 or something. And it's a grid, and there's AP1, AP2, AP3, 1/30, and it goes all the way through the grid. And then the one you get is circled by him by hand, so that it's a drawing in one way. and my friend True, who does the history part of the pod, had to buy one and snapped up one of whatever it was. I was like, that's really brilliant. Like, there's so much to talk about it. It's so great. I love it.
There are definitely some prints that are like kind of thinking about that. Like one of Parasol's more kooky projects was called the Rubber Stamp Portfolio.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just, it's so fun. And I think that captures his sense of like whimsy and humor. But Carl Andre just bought like a Bates stamp that you use for marking like legal documents, one of those auto advancing like number stamps. And so the print is just the number of the edition stamped in red ink on the sheet of paper. And so there's this kind of blurring between the logistical editioning of a print for its exterior to the artwork purposes, and then making that the actual content of the print.
Right. Exactly. That's great. That was a great portfolio. I didn't pull that out nearly enough for classes, though.
And a fun thing about that one, again, going back to delegating. So the actual stampers of that were Bob's children. So they're listed as the printer in the print documentation, and they're stamping the...
Oh, that's hilarious. So Andre wasn't even like close.
No.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
He's like, this is my idea. You do it.
You do it. Nice. That's very Lewittian.
Yeah.
I love that. I'll have to pull that out and look at it again. Pull it out. Look it up online. And I can't walk into the storeroom anymore.
I'll let you go back there.
All right. Well, is there anything coming up in the immediate future that I should let you share with our folks, or did we cover just about everything? Where is the show now, and where is it? I mean, I know where it is now, but know that this episode won't be out in the next 3 months. So
it is on view at the Addison until July 31st. So it has a nice long run. Hopefully, you have time to come up to Andover. We're just about 30-40 minutes north of Boston. And then a kind of smaller version of it, so really focusing on the 1970s and this minimal conceptual work, that's what Parasol is best known for. That sort of chunk of the show will be traveling to Print Center, New York, and that'll be on view from September to December. So
great.
Basically all of, or most of 2026, you should be able to catch it either in Andover or in New York in one form or another. I hope people will check it out.
I'm sure they will, because they're really great prints. They're worth seeking out for sure. Yeah.
Definitely, it's one where our wonderful photographer Frank Graham really had to do a lot of work to, for example, photograph the Rockburns, which do not photograph easily, or these Ryman prints that are monochromatic. And so it's definitely a show. I think he does an incredible job, and they look great in the catalog, but they're definitely prints that you should see, that you got to see in person to really appreciate everything that's going on there. So hopefully it's one that makes it on people's to-do list and they come check it out.
Sort of amazed that we haven't seen the Rockburns in some, I don't think I've ever seen them in person. It's weird. Why have people not hung them?
So Jennifer actually has them in a very small show at Harvard Art Museums right now.
Okay.
And what's interesting is at Harvard Art Museums, they have to show them folded. I'm not sure what the story is. I only have heard the secondhand. So I don't know how much longer that show is, but you can see them in two different forms. And then I remember seeing them once. The first time I ever saw them in person was at a show at the Hirshhorn several years ago. Every time I see them, which has now been like 3, it's been such a treat. Actually, my friend took a picture of me at that Hirshhorn show where I'm like, squatting in front of the prints, like looking at them from different angles. And she said something, like an art historian at work. And it's like me, like getting way too weird in front of the Rockburns.
Oh, that's funny. Well, that's the curator's, it's the printmaker's stance, right? About 3 inches from the frame.
Blocking everyone else's view as I'm like trying to find the right raking light.
Oh, that's great. Oh, well, Rachel, it's been lovely talking to you about your project. It sounds like I can only imagine how spectacular it looks on the walls. And I'm just so happy for you that it got done so expeditiously, and just seems like a wonderful first big project for you at the Addison.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a true labor of love. And I'm so thrilled that it now, exists in the world and not just on, in my brain and in my like stacks of messy papers on my desk. So it's exciting to see, it exist in real space and exist here as well. So I'm really thrilled and so thankful to have the opportunity to talk about it with you.
Oh, sure, of course. Yeah, and in museum databases across the world, Vogel numbers are going in.
I'll be checking. No.
That's so awesome. I'm so jealous. All right. Well, thank you again. It really was wonderful, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Thank you so much for joining me and Rachel Vogel for this look behind the scenes of Parasol Press. If you're in the area, be sure to catch Parasol Press breaking new ground at the Addison, though I think it's closed by now, or later this fall, you'll see a reduced version of it at the Print Center, New York. As always, you can find images of the prints we discuss in our show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps others find the show. Before I let you go, I always need to thank my team. Well, first I should thank Rachel for being a great guest. Thanks so much, Rachel. Secondly, I need to thank Dan Fury of Extension Audio for being my sound guy. Thanks, Dan. Uncle Michael Diamond for the use of his original music, and Skip Barnhart and Lee Turner for the sounds they sent me from their studios that make up the intro and outro of each episode. Until next time, keep exploring and appreciating the art around you. I'm Ann Shafer for Platemark.